And which will you do first?
I'll just talk about the study testing, and then I'll switch to the...
Okay, cool. Cool. So Mohammed will be, prior to the break, giving two brief introductions to topics. The first will be study testing. How do you test your study out? How do you trial it in a way that allows you to spot issues before getting comments back from participants about issues? Secondly, he's going to be giving a glimpse of where Ethica is going in terms of features and support for the next, for coming months and years. And Mohammed, I'm just going to switch this over to VGA, and you're good to go.
Okay. Thanks. I'm going to quickly cover a couple of items about testing the study. Today we wanted to just mostly focus on the analysis, and so I tried to keep it less than half an hour, but I thought it's very important to cover some of this stuff, because I don't exaggerate if I say I spend half of the time that we talk to people who use our system for support to just go through these items. Probably even more, maybe 60% of the time is spent just go through a couple of items that I will talk about here. It's not going to take much time. I'm also excited to mostly focus on the analysis. There are a lot of interesting things that I really wanted to share. But first, it's good to start with this. The very first item that's good to check is the participation period. There are a lot of, I've noticed there are a lot of mistakes happen here. When you set the study duration and participation period, you really have to be careful, although it seems simple, you only pick 3 numbers. You have to be careful that how that impacts participants when they join, how long they're going to be part of the study. And a very easy way to check is to just go to participation adherence page and see what is the join in date and the last date. Basically it says the study starts from this date. Actually the label here probably can be improved. I should take note that it's not join in, it's the date that the study will start for this participant. And this is the last day that data collection happens. Like, this is me joining our study that we created yesterday. I joined a day late, and that's why it shows that I joined on June 25th at 6:54 a.m. and the last data collection will happen on June 26th at 23:59, basically end of the day. The time zone matters here. This is local time zone, Central Standard Time. So it's really important to check to make sure that this is what you intend for. So the study period, the data collection only happens in this period. And it's really easy to make a mistake. Like I did it this morning. I was trying to test a survey and I kept trying it and it was not working, and I was like, oh, it has to be tomorrow, so why it doesn't show up? Turned out that because tomorrow, of course, is 27th and it's after the study start time. And like it took me 15 minutes to figure that out only. I do it every day. So it's really, really important to keep in mind that the participation period is exactly what you intend it to be. The other thing to test is the data sources. You just have to check that you included all the data sources that are necessary. Is there anything missing or anything that's extra that you can remove it? The most important impact will be on participants' battery life. The more you cut from data sources if you don't need it, or if it can be substituted by something more lightweight, for example, like raw motion sensor data versus pedometer data. It's really important to make these distinctions and pick the data sources carefully. What permissions are required to collect the data from the selected sources? I strongly suggest to join in your study in Android and iPhone and check the process, what permission prompts you get, so you know if people join with an Android phone or with an iPhone, what kind of permission request they get, so you can explain it. One of the items that's very unintuitive, that's of course it's on us to make the user interface a bit better and better explain it, is on iPhone, when you ask for any sort of sensor data, the first prompt that you get is that can we access your GPS? And people really freak out as, okay, I didn't ask for GPS, I just wanted to collect screen data, screen time data. So why you're asking for GPS? So things like this, you just have to be able to, or you or any of the study staff that are doing the deployment, they should be able to explain why these permissions are being asked and what kind of data is being collected. Another important one is the survey flow. Like, we have a long way to go to make the system, the survey simulator that we have, the survey preview, more usable and more practical. But there are some practices that you can follow to very well test the flow of the survey that you have created, especially when you have criteria that points to the questions in other surveys in the study. We talked about how criteria can be used to enable or disable a page, to enable or disable a triggering logic. These are really good, but at the same time, they make the survey very complicated. And the more complex it gets, the harder it gets to figure out is it really what you intend or not, especially if you do any modifications after that. The best flow we have found to test it the fastest way is that while you're just adding questions, you can use survey preview to just quickly test to see if this is what you intended for or not. When you added all the questions that you needed, then it's good to test it on a real phone and just make sure that you test all the skip patterns and triggering logics. But the tricky part is the surveys that are not user triggered. So for example, you test a survey, you have a survey that's supposed to be prompted for example, every week on Sunday afternoon, or when two beacons are in proximity, or a complex triggering logic like that. For testing that, the best practice is to just set it to the user trigger and test it, and when you're done with the flow, remove that triggering logic. For example, I will show it here. Let me see. Okay, I have this 4015, 4016. So this is the study that we created yesterday on Monday, and I added two surveys here. One is a baseline survey that asks for participants' gender, and the other one asks for weight and height. Both of them are time triggered. So if I just want to test it on a phone, it's never, it doesn't get prompted. I believe this one is all. So assume that the baseline survey, I want it to be prompted as soon as they join. So it's 0 days between 0 days and 0 days. So basically as soon as they join, and only once. So this is probably the triggering logic I have in mind. I'm gonna publish it. You might get a notification right now that the change happened. So, okay. And this is another survey that I want to, now forget about the triggering logic for now. Assume that I want to ask this maybe a day after participants joined. And I want to ask a couple of questions, for example, on height, on weight, and also if the participant is female, I want to ask whether she is pregnant or not. So these are the three questions that I have. But I have to test to make sure, because the question that determines whether the participant is female or not is in another survey. It's a survey that I asked at the beginning of the study. So if I join, let me move this around. If I join in this study here in the simulator, of course, like you can do it in your phone, assume this is the phone. Well, there's no way for me to run these surveys and test it, because one of them only is prompted once when I join. The other one only is prompted once the next day, and so the maximum I can try is 2 times on a phone. So one thing that I can do is I can come here, and for both of these surveys, for this one that's my baseline survey, and for this one that's related to weight and height, I can add a user triggered triggering logic here, call this baseline, add, I can save it, publish it. I can say no because I want to still make more changes here. Okay. And then here I can also add another user triggered button here called weight and height. Now if I come here, if I do update the studies that this has, you can see now I have a button for each of those surveys and I can keep trying them. Now I can go here first to the baseline. I say I'm male. And this is actually for my next example, so for now discard this. And when I go to weight and height, I can enter my height, my weight. And you see it doesn't ask me it didn't ask me the pregnancy question. So it means that it worked. But now if I respond as in baseline, if I respond I'm female, it should ask me that question. See, if I'm gonna try baseline survey again here, I'm gonna say I'm female, next, submit. Now if I take this survey again, here I got this question. So this way you can basically add a button for all the surveys that you have in your study and keep responding to them. Doesn't matter if it's something that's designed to be responded only once, like baseline. You can just keep responding to it, and every time that you respond, every other survey, because every other survey should work based on the last response. Like my last response was, I'm a female, that's why it asked me. If I respond to it again and say I'm a male, it has to behave differently. So if you add a user-triggered button to all of your survey, you can quickly go through it and check all the flow that you have in all your surveys. And that's really easy to test and make sure that all the skip patterns and branching, no matter how complex they are properly implemented and they behave correctly as you expect. Yes?
How important it is for me as a participant to update the studies after going the settings? Like if I don't update the studies?
No, this is prior to deployment. Actually, like maybe I should have said something. There are 3 phases before deployment. The first is that when you create a study, you have to test it yourself and just make sure that it completely works and everything is just as you expect. That's very easy. You can try it on your own phone with your own participant account. You can just do it as I'm doing right now with your phone on your side and, and your researcher account open in the browser. You can keep editing it, trying on the app, and make sure it works. When you got this part working, now you have to try it on a few friends and colleagues as dummy participants, ask them to join in your study, and go from like basically try the whole study protocol. Start from the very first day that you want to recruit a participant, and assume that the study goes for, I don't know, a week, or maybe even if it goes for as long as a year, try to, for a month, for a week or 2 weeks, try the flow, and make sure that everything that can impact, that is important when you go to the field, is being tested. So when you do this as well, when you try it with a few colleagues and friends and test those parts, then it's probably, even if there are changes coming up, it's probably changes that are either very minor or the ones that you couldn't have expected at the beginning of the study. So participants don't need to update their study anymore, because that's the version that you complete here, that you implement here, is the version that you want to pass it to the actual participants.
Yeah, I understand, but still, like, what if I have like some changes during the study?
Mm-hmm.
So shouldn't it be updated automatically after the study starts?
Yeah, so if you complete your study and you roll it out, and after some time you realize that, oh, you have to change that flow, or you made a mistake, or no, this thing has to be different, you can make that change, test it again yourself. A good practice is that don't publish it, or publish it, but don't update participants' devices, because if you don't publish it, you can't test it as a participant yourself. So publish it, but don't update participant devices yet. Then test it yourself to make sure that the change that you applied is exactly what you wanted to apply. And when you are confident, then you can go to adherence page here So if I can make some changes here, I can make some changes here, and it can keep asking me that, do you want to update? I say, no, don't do it. Then I can test it myself, and when I'm confident, I can go here to adherence, and I can update participants' devices from here. And they will receive the latest changes. You can also not do that. You can just wait after, but as soon as you publish it, you basically make it available to participants, and within a few days, their device contacts the server and gets the latest version anyway.
Okay, so me as a researcher updating from adherence is equivalent to participants updating from their phone?
Yeah, that's equivalent. Doesn't matter you make a change here, and for example, I remove the survey, I save it, publish it. Whether here I say yes, update the participants' devices, or here I go and say update all devices, or I go to the app and say update my study down here, all of them updates the study content. Yes?
If you just want to test as a researcher that the new functionality works as expected, can you update just one participant, or can you push it to only your researcher account?
You can do it as well. Here you can choose that, yes, only update, for example, this ID and don't update the other ones.
And on the adherence page too.
Or here you can say only update this device and not the other ones.
So, Mohammed, I'm going to ask a point of, as normal, of great ignorance. So, can you had said preview survey before. Is there some sort of special preview?
Yeah, here, when I talked about preview survey, is about this survey preview here that allows you to actually look at this. But this doesn't have all the features that, for example, this doesn't have all the features that you get in survey. For example, this doesn't check the criteria that are linked to other pages, other surveys, the skip patterns and branchings. It doesn't take all the variables into account when if you have any variable substitution in your questions. So there are some limitations with this. We're working to improve this, but even then, it's very important to test it on phones before before rolling out the study.
Yeah, that's very helpful. So there's that tab that's there for all surveys. You can select the preview tab.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
For all of them, like for example, you can see it says mail, and it tells me what time I say early and done. But if I come here, if I, for example, go to the next and go to the next page, yes. Well, it didn't ask me that question about pregnancy because it just by default evaluated it to false,
I see.
while it should have evaluated it to true.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks.
Mohammed,
Yes.
if you wanted to test a longer study over several months or whatnot, but you want to test it in a short time frame, we're just going to change the dates, right, on, say, the survey deliveries, and then once, you see they're all delivered fine, then you change the dates back to what you want. That's pretty much the only option.
Depends exactly, like, you can do that as well, but if the survey flow works as you expect, I'll talk about how you can test the triggering logic both for time and for proximity as well. If you test these three, then it doesn't matter that your study is for 1 week or 5 years. Still the same flow applies, right? The same flow works this time and next year and the year after as well. Any other questions about this part? Okay. The next one is testing survey triggering. If it's eligibility triggering logic, or if it's user triggering logic, or if it's dropout, these three are simple. Like, they have to be presented when you join the study, they have to be presented as a button, they have to be presented when you try to drop out. The two that are a bit more tricky, one is time, the other one is proximity. How you would test a survey, whether, for example, your proximity configuration is correct, you have correctly programmed the beacon, you have correctly adjusted those settings. How you test this timetable that you have defined is presented properly. For time, Ethica actually calculates the schedule of all the future surveys, actually not all of them, for the next, I think, 40 prompts. For the next 150 prompts, right after the participant joins. either 150 or anything lower than that if it's supposed to be cut before that, lower than that. But then it keeps adding 50, 50, 50 to have always enough of surveys available. And you can see when these prompts are supposed to be presented to participants. So you can go to the survey sessions page and check if the schedule is exactly what you intended or not. Especially if you have multiple triggering logics. For example, you say, one thing we were talking with Gimantla yesterday was a couple of triggering logics that a question in the baseline would ask participants, when do you want to receive your survey? Morning, early morning, late morning, afternoon, or evening. And then based on that, you would schedule a survey for the next day to be presented. I tried to create a survey just like that here as well. Assume that in our baseline, we ask a question here that what time of the day is best for you to receive the scheduled survey. And we give them 4 options, from 6 to 8, from 8 to noon, noon to 4 p.m., and 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then we want to set our other survey to be presented based on what they chose in the previous one. So say if they chose in the previous one from 6 to 8, use this one. If it's from 8 to 12 to noon, use this one, noon to 4 p.m., this one, and so on. So how to test this is that if I go here in my researcher dashboard, I go to survey sessions, and okay, the internet's been a bit slow today. Okay, so I can choose this participant, the last one that I just joined. I believe that's my account. 13298, yes. And the survey number is 4016 for the day 26th. You can see that right now it's set to be prompted at 4:58 p.m. Now if I go here, the same practice as before. I have all of them as user triggered. I go back on my phone, I'm in here in the baseline, I say I'm a male, and I want to receive it early in the morning from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. This is a tricky, I believe it should show me nothing here. Yes, it disappeared. The reason that it doesn't show that anymore because 6 to 8 a.m. is already past of today, and my participation is only until the end of today. But if I choose, for example, from noon to 4 p.m., it should show me one pending survey here at some time between noon to 4 p.m. I'm gonna take this survey again, say I'm male, next. Okay. Now if I just, with the same setting, press go here, you see there's one pending that says scheduled for Wednesday 26th at 12:58. That's participants' local time zone. So I know that, okay, so they're not gonna receive 4 of them, only the 3rd one will be applied here. And the same if I just choose evening, it should be something between, with a time between 4 to 8 p.m., which is 4:58. A time randomly chosen in that range. So you just have to check any schedule that you have to join as a participant and see what's the dates that you get here. And is it the dates that you expected the surveys to be presented? If not, there's something wrong with that has to be fixed. The last one is the proximity triggering logic. For this, you have to test. This is actually quite complex. You have to test 2 things. First, you have to test that you have programmed your beacon correctly. I actually wanted to show one thing on that. I can't show it on the simulator. It has to be on a real phone. There are tools. There are a lot of apps on App Store. One of them, for example, is Beacon Scanner that you can use to scan beacons in proximity, and it shows the values that the beacon is programmed with. So when you do go in that beacon mapping and you say, well, here's my team ID, role ID, subject ID, it gives you a UUID and major minor value, and you program them and everything. Now you have to make sure that you have programmed them correctly. you can easily just open this application. Let me see if I can show it here. Okay, I want to view this phone. You can see that it shows all of the beacons that we programmed yesterday. Number 1, number 6. If I scroll a bit, number 2, number 1 again, number 1. These are the different major values. Number 8. So you can easily scan the beacons that are in the room. What are the values that they are showing? And so just to make sure that the values that you have programmed them are the correct values. Because if the value is incorrect and it's wrong, it's not what you have entered in the beacon mapping, it's not going to work. It's just, it might detect it or it might not even detect it. Because if the value is incorrect, especially if the UUID is incorrect, it thinks it's a different beacon that's not relevant to Ethica, so it doesn't even pick it up. So it doesn't even report that, hey, there is something that incorrectly programmed. So you just have to make sure that you correctly program these beacons. And a trick that you can use is to use these USB beacons, because you can very easily simulate people coming into contact and leaving them. When you plug it in, it's like that beacon appeared. When you unplug it from the USB, it's like the beacon turned off. So it's like the person departed. I use it, like, and all of us, like me and my colleagues, often use it for testing it, because it's very easy. I plug it to USB. It's like the person that I'm testing something. It's like the person appeared, and I just leave it there for half an hour. I unplug it. It's like the person departed, and then I have to get the prompt on the app. If I don't get it, there is some configuration not correct. Okay, I believe. Yeah, I mentioned, so before I go to the other 2 sections, any question about this testing of surveys so far? We talked with Rifat's question about the importance of testing with dummy participants. After testing the studies, set up yourself, simulate the entire study protocol with friends and colleagues, invite them as dummy participants to join the study, and then make sure that every step of the study deployment goes as you expect. Ethica also captures every detail of participant interactions with the Ethica app and reports to the researchers. So every time that they open the app, every survey they get, every beacon that their phone visits, every time they log in, log out, sign up, everything, all of those are reported. If there is something for an individual that you see it's not working, you can go through these audit logs. They look like this, for example. It says at I believe application update at 2 minutes, at 3 a.m. and 2 minutes, automatic data upload started, and then upload survey responses started, upload survey responses started. This finished after 1 second. Automatic data upload that was started at this time finished after 6 seconds, uploading around 1.5 megabytes of data. You can read this like basically all the actions that the app has done. If you notice that there is something broken, you can just go through this and see what was the problem there. And by the way, this one is also through Kibana. If you go to Kibana, just the same way that we looked at data yesterday, I can come here. I believe I have already created an index for looking at participant history data that I selected over there. I just have to say, instead of last 15 minutes, I say show me the reports from 25th, yesterday. And I can say only for user ID 1 and sort by time. The 2 things that are important are event types and messages. Yeah, and you can see that every time that I've opened the app, I've closed the app, every survey that's presented, and whether it was responded or not, all the beacons visited, and so on. There is a detailed description of what events are available and what each of them mean. If you come to the documentation, the analysis participant history report talks about how you can access this and what are the events that are available, like user events, like sign up, sign in, sign out, and so on, app events, survey events, notification events, settings, like for example, if they have set their phone to upload via Wi-Fi only, and then they're not connected to Wi-Fi, you're not gonna get any data. And then the question is that, okay, so why a few days or a few weeks has passed and we don't have any data from this participant? You can easily come here and see that it says user check upload via Wi-Fi only setting. So it means that the app will only upload when the Wi-Fi is available. And then you can see that the events for, and I think there will be entries that automatic upload, data upload started, automatic data upload finished unsuccessfully because user was not connected to Wi-Fi. Yeah, so there, you can use this as reference. Okay. A couple of points about the roadmap, but before we go there, is everything, any questions about this so far? Yes.
I was curious because I think previously we were talking about having participants kind of have some time to really get familiar with the app before actually starting their data collection.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, how do you, I guess, identify that for, or how do you allow them to do that within the app if you have like kind of scheduled times for doing certain surveys, or is it more just like getting kind of a sense of the functionality or like the interface and not necessarily practicing surveys?
I believe what what the suggestion was that is if there are surveys that participants are expected to do or activities that they're expected to do on daily basis, you can just and you only need data, for example, for 14 days from every participant or 20 days for every participant. Just add a bit of a warm-up time period at the beginning, maybe 2 days or so. You don't have to tell participants that, hey, the first 2 days, it's just we are going to discard the data. You actually shouldn't tell them, so they think that the study is 22 days, and they do all their the best to provide the best data for all of the 22 days. But you can expect that things might go wrong the first 2 days.
Right.
If they don't, you can only take 20 days of that. But you can assume that always you take the data from the from second date to the 22nd date. But Nate, maybe you can comment more on that.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned some of the major potential items there. Maybe I'm conscious of the time, so maybe we could talk about it offline. And
Oh yeah.
just we're running a bit late for the
break. Yes.
Yeah. So is that okay, Megan?
Yeah.
I can take it up.
Yeah. So a couple of items about the roadmap. I'm actually very also one of the goals of this workshop was for me, Nate, and others in the team to learn that what we have to implement and what's the shortcomings of Ethica. The ones that I already have mentioned that it's our focus for the next probably a few months. The first is completing the web-based Ethica app and the rollout support for SMS and email notifications and all the activities that we've shown, like the time use tracker, the expense tracker, integration with ASA24 and the cognitive tasks. There is another feature that's coming up for supporting secure communication between participants and researchers, like through the app, participants to be able to message researchers or even make calls to researchers like through the system. And one thing that Megan suggested yesterday that I believe was like a very, very good suggestion that we plan to squeeze it in our roadmap before fall is the support for researcher-defined survey sessions. So so researchers are able to generate the time that they intend for a survey to happen in any randomization that they have in mind, and they can upload that, and then that overrides any session that Ethica has defined, and that becomes like the point of reference. For the same for activities, for example, if you intend, for example, for ASA24 integration, on certain days to ask participants to complete those food recalls, nutrition recalls, and the triggering logics that we have doesn't provide the support that you have in mind, you should be able to define those sessions for completing each of those activities, whether it's survey or not or something else. and you can upload that to the system, and Ethica should use those as the sessions for participants. And for later 2019 and next year, we will be focusing on integrations with other analysis tools. Kibana has been great for analyzing sensor data, but it's primarily intended for large-scale sensor data. It's not very good when you're analyzing survey responses. You need more flexibility. The survey responses inherently are smaller in size. They're not at size of sensor data, but you need more flexibility in running queries. Tools like Metabase, Superset, Apache Superset, and of course SAS, Stata, and R are very good for this analysis. We are already working on the first two, Metabase and Apache Superset, and we already have a plan to integrate with the other three as well. There are probably some limitations there, but this is what we hope that we can roll out by next year. Support for wearables on mobile and web-based Ethica applications. We talked about that we are working on Google Fit and Fitbit right now, and we hope that we can expand it next year. And other sensor-based triggering logics. We talked about beacons, but there are a lot of triggering logics based on screen time, based on GPS. For example, when you enter a geofence, when you leave a geofence, if you have used your phone for longer than a certain period, like for more than 3 hours a day or less than half an hour a day, triggering logics like that basically use other sensor data, like motion sensors, to prompt surveys or other activities that has to be completed. And the notifications for researchers, that was a suggestion that Brianna had, but also we had thought about it before as well. This allows researchers to basically to define criteria that, for example, if a certain survey is responded in a certain way, researchers should be notified, especially for for example, the studies that deal with participants' emotions or suicidal ideations. If any response like that is detected, researchers should be notified. And notifications like this, we will be adding them. But if there is anything else that you have in mind, please let's talk about it. I'm available. I'm going to be here until tomorrow afternoon, and any time from now until tomorrow afternoon, I would be more than happy to discuss your thoughts. Okay, sorry, we are a bit over time. I intended to be shorter, but well, it's 10:30, so I can stop here, and we can go for a break.